Hi, folks. Thanks for joining our live demo webinar. I'm Paul Dudley, co-founder and CEO of Streamkap, and joined here by Ricky Thomas, who's our co-founder and CTO.
Yeah, hi.
So this is a bit of a follow-up from a webinar we had last week. So for those who didn't get a chance to see it, I definitely recommend revisiting. We had Marcin Migda, who's a staff data engineer at Spot On, join us, and he talked a little bit about his end-to-end pipelines using Streamkap to get data from MySQL, stream it into Snowflake using Snowpipe Streaming and dynamic tables. And he goes into a lot more detail about what they did, how they did it, and what they achieved. But the ultimate outcome was a 4 times faster and 3 times cheaper data pipelines that ultimately end up giving a much better end result for their customers, much lower latency and in a customer-facing application for them. And Spot On's a point of sale provider, so they've got a lot of restaurant customers. So having low latency in the context of that kind of environment is super important. And one of the follow-ups we had coming out of that was a lot of folks were interested in. I think Marcin gave a great overview of the Snowflake side of things and sort of what the end-to-end looks like. But we had a lot of folks who are interested in a bit more detail on what does Streamkap actually do? How does that work? And seeing a demo of our platform. So we thought we'd set this up today and have Ricky take us through a live demo so you can see what that actually looks like. So I'll hand that over to you, Ricky, and we'll go through a live demo.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Let me just share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah. Do I need to zoom in, or is it okay? It looks okay, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Okay, good. Okay, so what we'll do is first of all just have a look at the type of connectors we support. So I've got a MySQL one here, but let's just go to add. From a source connector point of view, we've got these ones listed here, such as DocumentDB, Elasticsearch, MongoDB, MySQL, Oracle, Postgres, SQL Server, and DB2. And Vitess. We are about to also support DynamoDB, as well as push-pull direct into Kafka, and so in effect high volume type connectors also. And then on the destination front, at the moment we support destinations such as BigQuery, ClickHouse, CockroachDB, Databricks, DB2, MySQL, Oracle, Postgres, Redshift, Rockset, of course, which is going for a transition, S3, SQL Server, Snowflake, Starburst, and Redis. We're about to add in Azure destinations also, and Iceberg and others are about to come to. You can invite colleagues to help set up these connectors also. And to show you what we've got going here, at the moment I have a Snowflake destination that's already created, but what we'll do for this demo is create a new MySQL source to replicate what Spot On have done, and create the pipeline and bring those together. So so first of all, let's create the source. So we start with just adding MySQL, and as you can see, it's the sort of credentials you'd be used to adding as before with any other ETL tool. So it is pretty simple to get going. We can support connection via SSH tunnel as well for databases which are behind a firewall. And I'm going to show you the contents of the tables in a second, just to show you that these are empty and we'll start populating data. So let's see if that gets added. Okay, so that's now initializing the source. By default connection, as in we create that, it doesn't do a snapshot or a backfill or a historical sync on the data. It can do, but we typically take care of it when we create the pipeline instead. So let's go and create a pipeline now to connect the source to the destination. So we've got demo live, which I just created. I'm going to send it to Snowflake, which I created earlier. I've got a demo table here, which is what I'll show you in a second. And let's just give this a name of demo live as well. Just going to pop into Snowflake to show you that this table does not exist, but it should exist once this connector is up and running. First thing it does is just create an empty table, even if there's no data to be streamed. So that should have created, I believe. Yep, so that table now exists with 0 records in it. And we've got a pipeline, one topic or one table, connecting the MySQL source to the Snowflake destination. So now let's go to the source database. As you can see here, looks like that's just reconnecting to the database. So that will refresh in a second. Okay, and we can see there's 0 records in there. What we're going to do today is just insert one record to start with. And so let's have a look if that went in. So there's my one record. And then we're going to use, I'm using dbeaver, and we're going to use this to generate some streaming data. Generate some data, which we can then stream. So we can generate some mock data. So let's create 1 million records. We're going to do it in batch sizes of 200. I'm running this from my laptop. Obviously, you can use higher throughput as part of any testing. So that should get going. So that is now sending data into MySQL, the table we've created, and it will be finding its way over to Snowflake. Before we go and look at that data arriving, we've got an example here of alerts also. We'll go into alerts in a second, but we can set up all sorts of type here. So here is my free alerts based on actions I took, and we can create more of those as we go along. So I'll come back to that in a second. So now let's have a look at the count, and we can see that records are streaming in. We've got 12,000 in so far. We'll just give that a few seconds. Snowflake typically updates in batches, so you won't see 1207, 1208, for example, if you're clicking refresh, but let's try again. And so now that's 25,000 and so on. So that is really how easy it is to start streaming data from MySQL to Snowflake using Snowpipe Streaming. A couple of things on that. Snowpipe Streaming does not use a Snowflake warehouse, and so actually, and the cost is negligible. So you can import about 1 terabyte of data into Snowflake for $20 to $30, and it shows up differently in the billing. And so if you use Streamkap to run real-time data, you pretty much you mostly save all the warehouse costs also with Snowflake. So let's come back at these alerts and have a look at this. And so there's an example of the alerts. Let's look at the channels we support. So we support email, Slack, Teams, Discord, Mattermost, and Grafana as channels. We are about to bring in a generic webhook also. That will be useful if you want to send the alerts to things like OpsGenie and PagerDuty. And the types of alerts we support, as we saw earlier, is anything that happens around the destinations, the pipelines, or the sources. We can also let you know if the pipelines failed, if there's no data running through in the last 30 minutes, and things like this. So that we find is enough to make sure you're alerted to any issues, basically. Logs. Full log history is available in the app. We can click the link here through to each connector destination, but also we can look at the raw messages also. If you get an error while creating a connector and so on, the error message will appear in line also. to make it easier for diagnostics. We can view the topics. We do support transforms also, although we're not demoing that today. So these are real-time transforms in the pipeline, which will help with things like unpacking Mongo data. It could be hashing, it could be renaming, these sort of things. Also, and then we also support a dashboard, which helps look at just the overall state of Streamkap, latency, the pipelines, and so on. So that should just be about loading. And so here's the data that's been loading since we started. We can also look at not just the events received, but also look at volume as well. So 66 meg, for example, has been processed. Yep, and then maybe something just useful to show, because I didn't show it during the setup, I don't think. But when you create the pipeline, let's just go there. I won't create it, but I'll just show you. There's this option here, snapshot topics. So this will then do the historical sync when the pipeline is created. Equally, I can go into a connector or on the topics page and also trigger a new snapshot. In this scenario here, I've got a snapshot option at the top here, which will trigger all tables for that connector. Or we can go into an individual topic and snapshot that also. Not sure why that's taking a little bit longer. Let's try that again. Okay, so as I said, we can do a snapshot at the connector level. We can also do a snapshot here at each individual topic level. Also, we've got a summary of information such as latency and so on. Now, this latency is taking an average over a couple of minutes or a few minutes, and so we'd expect that to head down to about 200 milliseconds as it sees more recent time of constant streaming rather than any gap in the the time it took before we started syncing data. And that's really it. We've got the options here to add more tables and databases and so on. So that's the demo over.
Great, thanks, Ricky. We had some good questions from the folks on the live stream here. So let's jump into that. I think I was responding to some of them in the comments, but I was just checking on LinkedIn. It wasn't clear if those were actually going through to LinkedIn. So we can just we can answer those live here.
Yeah.
Before we dig into that, I think I'll just add this back onto the stage. So one note, if you while we're going through the Q&A, if you scan the QR code or just go to streamkap.com, you can sign up for a free trial and try this out yourself, and we're happy to help there. We've got a support chat in the app, or once we're done with the Q&A, I'll give you a link here for booking a meeting with me, and we generally also set up a Slack with our customers who are testing out the platform and once they've signed up. So we've got good channels for support if you want to try this out yourself. But let's go into the questions a little bit. So we had a couple of questions about sort of the mechanism here. You partially addressed this, but there's a question about whether we're using Snowpipe or warehouses.
Yeah, so you've actually got the option. So if you choose upsert mode, which might be something you're used to, such as you import through Fivetran, for example, then you end up with one final state table with only the most recent changes. This does use a warehouse during the import process, and so costs would look similar in your Snowflake warehouse costs as they would do with another vendor, excluding obviously the costs and speed. So even if we go in through upset mode, we are still importing in real time, but you will have a Snowflake warehouse cost. If you use Snowpipe Streaming and therefore insert mode, which means every change event is logged in the destination table, this is not using warehouses, and in effect, as I mentioned earlier, the costs are negligible, like $20, $30 per terabyte of data. You've got a couple of options at that point. A lot of customers do choose to keep the historical data or delete it after a certain amount of time. and others will, it's not really a problem because they just do a dedupe to a final state table, whether they're doing a transform, through DBT or dynamic tables, for example. So the choice is yours. What we find, including what Spot-On found, was if they import through Streamkap real time with Snowpipe Streaming and dynamic tables, creating those final state tables and clearing up the historical and so on was still massively cheaper than an ETL tool, a batch ETL tool plus Snowflake warehouses, basically.
Yeah, we've got some great resources for that. So again, if you didn't see the webinar last week with Spot-On, we'll make sure that all the attendees get a link to that, and you can hear from another customer who has dug into it. We've also got some great blogs on our website with technical details about sort of end-to-end setup, and including using dynamic tables in Snowflake. So some great resources there. One follow-up question to that was around updates and deletes. Are those captured through Snowpipe Streaming?
Yeah, exactly. So what happens with an update is you, in effect, create another row in the destination table. So you would have the old row and the new row with the changed final state values. You'll have metadata added to those rows, including at what time we read it from the source. So you've got all the original data plus what we've added: the original time we read it, the time that we handled it, and then you can look at the time that's also been inserted. For example, this is down to microseconds, so it's very easy to create a view on top of that to grab the final state also. But like I said, then you've got the historical changes, which can be useful for understanding the changes that have happened to any fields or any restores you might need to do and so on, which a lot of people need. And then deletes are also logged. So in the same scenario I just gave, you've got the original non-deleted row, and then the deleted row would come through with a deleted flag showing as true. So you include the deleted flag in the transform to remove it from your final state view also.
Great. I've got another question here. When ingesting large tables or row batches, can you run parallel load threads or processes and slice the data?
Yeah. So to try to put that in perspective, so if you're streaming from the source log, I know you're talking about ingesting, but we'll just cover the source. That log data can be read extremely fast. So even if it's like a terabyte of data, it will download incredibly quickly. I can't give an exact time, but it's extremely fast. And we don't see any customers with any latency issues, whether they're transferring 50 terabytes a month upwards, if that makes sense. When it comes to ingesting, yes, you can allocate additional tasks to the ingestion. Snowflake is pretty fast, but there are customers where we increase the tasks, and then it will run it all in parallel and keep it up to date again to that, in effect, sub-second latency. Our system will have attempts at trying to do that automatically. Literally, worst case, we just manually tune it. But the benefit you get with Streamkap is that our job is to make sure it stays sub-second latency. And so it's not something you have to worry about. If we see latency in the pipeline, you can get alerts about it for starters. We will get alerts about it, and we will make sure that the performance is maintained if there's any issues. But we don't tend to see them. But if there is, our engineers will look at it. You can actually increase the tasks yourself as well.
Great. So got some sort of related questions that maybe we can knock out together. So one is a question about connecting to on-prem data sources, and then also about sort of keeping the data off of the internet and what options are there from a security perspective or a data residency perspective.
Okay, sure, yeah. Okay, so our hosted versions, so we're SOC 2 compliant. We're hosted on AWS. We have a US region at the second. Next week we'll have Europe. And so the fastest way to get going is to use our hosted versions. But we have customers using a BYOC, or bring your own cloud deployment. And this means that the data, in effect, doesn't leave your VPC. And the way that works is that the nodes on the data plane remains in your environment, but the front end app remains in ours. But data is not leaving, and there'll be a VPN connection, for example, between us to keep it secure. And this is useful for different things, not just for security data protection, but maybe the sources and destinations you've got are actually within your VPC also. And there's no point that data moving its way back to us and then back down to yourself as well. So in that scenario, it could be it's in the region. So that's still covered under our SOC 2 and allows your team to have more security over it. It's deployed by a VPC. This would typically be a subtenant or a sub account of an Amazon account or something like this, or Azure. And the networking team in your end will be involved in just making sure we've got our limited rights. And then it's maintained. You don't need to install any software. All that actually happens is we're given a installer type of credential. It's a one-time use. So we can have a user ID in effect generated, install the nodes, but this includes the setup of the nodes, install the software, and so on. And then we just have an agent that sits next to it. And that's just for helping upgrade or in effect release updates to connectors and so on. So it's actually very simple. No real work for your DevOps teams whatsoever. Once we get past just the basic security and permission setup.
Great. And just to close that out, so if you're using the hosted version, that is the Streamkap hosted version, we also have the option to connect via AWS private link. So if you wanted to keep your internet, your data traffic off the internet, you can do that for greater security. And there's also some advantages in that case of lower egress costs. And then we can also connect to an on-prem database. So as distinct from the BYOC, the BYOC deployment, or could be in conjunction with, we have a proxy agent we can deploy for on-prem databases or connect via VPN, depending on what the sort of connectivity options are. So there's a lot of options there.
Just to add, and as I demonstrated earlier, you can just do SSH tunnels also in the Apple as well.
Yeah, great. So I think that maybe we'll kind of start to wrap up here a little bit, but one thing I'll just jump ahead here. If anybody has, obviously, as we said, feel free to try out Streamkap on on the website. You can sign up for a free trial, and we can also happy to meet with you directly. So if you scan the QR code, you can book a meeting with me. I'm happy to double click on any of your questions and use cases directly and answer any questions. And one question that we always get is what does the pricing look like? I think we've sort of talked a little bit about this at a high level, but it's fairly straightforward. It's based on the gigabyte volume coming into Streamkap. It starts at around $600 per month on a monthly plan, or $500 a month if you're committing to an annual, and then scales up from there based on volume of data. We've got pretty clear, transparent pricing on the website at streamkap.com if you want to check it out in more detail. Or again, feel free to book a meeting. Happy to dig a little deeper into any specific questions or other issues or what have you that folks have. And then, as I said, we typically, for folks doing a trial and in full deployments, we'll set up a shared Slack or Teams channels so that we can get folks connected directly to our team and help if you run into any challenges as you're getting things up and going. But yeah, I think that's sort of the main questions it looks like we have for folks today, and hopefully that was a helpful demo for you. I mean, anything else you want to add before we wrap up here, Ricky?
No, I don't think so. I think so it was a good overview. So
okay,
good.
Great. All right. Well, yeah. Thanks again, everybody, for for joining us today. And like I say, get in touch with us if you have any interest in trying Streamkap out. We'd love to help you replicate what Ricky's done here and get you going quickly and get low latency data to help power better experiences for your customers. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.